Hello and welcome to the latest ARCHLine.XP webinar. My name is Zoltán Tóth. Over here is, as always, our resident architect, Mr. Illés Pap.
Hi there.
Today we talk about lighting, visuals, and we create amazing things. So lots to do. Let's take a look.
Building Information Modeling, or BIM for short, is a wonderful tool to create great architecture. Unfortunately, many might believe that BIM is out of their reach. This is because adapting from 2D drafting to BIM might seem time-consuming and costly. Also, it seems that BIM means a whole new workflow and methods which you need to learn from scratch, and the new requirements and legislations may seem too complicated to follow. Our mission behind ARCHLine is to open a gateway to BIM. ARCHLine makes the transition from 2D drafting to BIM step by step. It takes you from 2D to 3D modeling and introduces BIM parameters to your workflow. Sharing your projects with other professionals is effortless. The software makes sure that you can use your already existing CAD skills, files and projects to stay competitive. The gate is now open for new challenges and previously unavailable projects. ARCHLine is an out-of-the-box IFC certified BIM software. No extra plugins are needed to complete your project because your design will contain everything in a single file. You will work together with other parties of the building industry seamlessly. Avoid misunderstandings. Use real products. Collaborate better than before. BIM is quickly becoming the standard. Make sure you are there with ARCHLine.
So today marks the fifth and final installment of our Gateway to BIM series. So far we looked at how to use ARCHLine to create building models, how to use architectural data, and how to yield architectural data from your models. And we also talked about what kind of BIM benefits you can use for your everyday design efforts. Today, on the other hand, we talk about visual related things. Lights, renders, and sunlight, geolocation, other kind of things.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of things that we want to cover in terms of how you can create images like these ones. Now, Illés, can you tell us a bit more about what we see on the screen right now?
Well, these are renders either made with the internal renderer or the external renderers, because ARCHLine actually has a built-in render and it also communicates with third-party renderers. So
Yes.
should you have a third-party installment of Atlantis or another third-party renderer, ARCHLine is able to communicate with that software as well. And today we will try to focus on the built-in renderer, what
Yes.
you can do with that, highlighting the most important things and the focus points of visual design and what sort of details you should take care of regarding the lights, the materials, and how to easily set up something which at the end ends as a photograph of the exterior or the interior. Today we will use an interior model mainly, but all those principles that we discussed now with the internal lights and materials and everything else are just as the same applicable for the external models. There is one or two specific differences for the external models. We will talk about those as well, but whatever you see is just as the same for the external and internal models.
That's right. So the idea here is that we will talk about what the basic concepts are in order to create visuals similar to this one. Now, as always, I urge you to ask your questions on the right-hand side next to me. You can ask your questions during the show, and at the end, we are going to try and cover everything that you're asking. So let's cut to the chase. We have an interior design project here, but what you are going to tell us today can be applied for external architecture or other kind of projects, right?
Yeah, because actually both worlds are different in a way. When we still talk about the same building, just as an architect, for example, I'm focusing on the details in the exterior or the spaces themselves. As for example, an interior designer, I'm focusing on the details, the textures, and all sorts of other things. Now here, what you can see is a hotel. I mean, it's an apartment building, single room. We made it a little bit simple. I mean, removed all the other rooms details, so we can easily focus on what's the most important for us today. But the same thing is also applicable for larger projects as well. So now what we see, and I think what we should start with is either from the architectural or the interior designer point of view, is the geolocation and the sunlight of the building, the daytime setting.
So, let's talk about lights in general, because we have to talk about artificial lights, but also natural lights. So we should talk about and cover what governs how lights look like. So where do we get started?
Yeah, talking about lighting, I would divide those the lighting elements to two main groups. Just as you mentioned, one is the natural lights, and the other one is the artificial lights. When we talk about natural lights, it's actually the surrounding and the sunlight. Now that's governed by the geolocation of the building. That can be set up either in the BIM settings, like in the file, BIM, and the project parameters. Here you can find the project location where you have the options to set it up. And actually those settings and those options are also available here at the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
There is the north sign of this project now. Currently, the north sign, the north direction points downwards, and this is always related to the ground, to the floor plan. So when you see it's pointing this direction, this means it's the north on this drawing is at this location. So this actually brings up a menu where you can set up the north direction, the sun position. This is actually combining the location and the sun position, the date and time settings, and the north direction. So it's a one single place where you can set up all of those things. You can select a city. You can go and find the month and day and local time and the north direction. And also there is another option which we won't talk about now is the Google Maps, where you can also set up the location, picking up a point on the Earth, simply just clicking there.
Now my question is, if you set up the geolocation, then the sunlight would shine in the way it's actually supposed to, right?
Yeah. Well, let me just show you in the meantime while you're saying that. Yeah.
And after that, I want to see what happens if you want to customize it. Obviously, this is not something that would actually occur, but sometimes you want to show your design in the best possible light. So let's see both options.
Yeah. Okay. So now I will talk about the shadow simulation. This shadow simulation actually brings up a dialogue of the that's actually the horizon, and that's the path of the sunlight. In the sun itself at this specific time and at this specific date. Now when I move this, as you can see, the date governs the path of the sunlight at this location, and this actually governs where the sun is located. You can actually drag this because, as you can see, it's easy to find the largest, the tallest, the highest point of the sun on this globe. If you would like to set up a morning time or an evening time, this is kind of more visual than just imagining that what's the morning time, I don't know, in October or summertime. So you can use both, and as you can see, parallel to this, ARCHLine always visualizes real-time how the sunlight affects the interior. This is not a render, this is not a real-time render. This is just a simple shaded version of the final visual that we would like to talk about. But when I hit OK, this will be the sun setting of the whole building. So I can set up something that I like, and then I can just simply click on OK, or if I just would like to drop it, I just click cancel. So whatever I do, this will affect how the sunlight will behave, how the sunlight will bright up this scene. It's wise to choose sometimes when you have a lot of light source, external light coming in, it is easier to kind of burn out the surfaces. I will talk about this when we talk about the material. So that's how you set up the sunlight, and this is also a place where you can find the same thing, the shadow simulation. So this is kind of a collector here. North direction, sun position, Heliodon. This is the artistic sun setting when you can set up something which is not realistic. Not in a real way. The sunlight won't come inside the building like that. But it's in that case you can actually just pick a point, and from that direction the sunlight will come in. So you have both options.
What about artificial light sources?
Artificial light sources are actually, in ARCHLine we call them lamps. And the only difference between a kind of a light source and a lamp is that a lamp is an object that hosts one or more light sources. So, and a light source is kind of the bulb or something like that. It is always attached to something, and you can move that something, that lamp, and via that object you can transform it. So just to make it practical, we talk about lamps that are actually downloaded or hosted objects from the software, when you select them either on 2D or in 3D, you can see those bulbs appearing. That means that this lamp actually has at least 2 light sources, because we can see 2 bulbs appearing, and those crosses here, the black crosses, those are the sources themselves. I mean, that's where the light sources are. So this is how it looks like when you have, for example, spotlight, when you have an LED strip, all those are represented in a similar fashion. Now, these things are something that you can find in the libraries of the software, so you can go to the objects. I'm not going to the light sources, that's a different spot, we will talk about that. I'm going to the objects and then open up the lighting, and this is where you can find the lighting objects, the lamps themselves, like floor lights, pendant lamps, and so on. These are the lamps.
Now, obviously, this is our built-in library, right? So the software comes with a fixed amount of lamps and you know, this kind of gadgetry.
Yes.
How do you import additional objects?
Before we talk about that, there is one more thing that I wanted to cover here, and it's actually, I talked about how you can select them and how you can determine that they are lights, but how can you handle them? Handling a lamp, it's just as the same as an object. I mean, geometrically, you can just place it, you can set up its base elevation. That's very simple. But when we talk about its light part, it's here. You can say that actually you would like to manage its lighting, edit the light source, for example, or just check whether you have 1 or 2 light sources attached. And this is where you can manage. We will go deeper into this setting now. But I'm just showing that this is how it looks like. There's the object itself, and there are the settings. This is actually where you can turn it on or off. But there is a simpler way to do that. If you select one, or actually you can do it with multiple items as well. I'm just holding the Ctrl key. So when you have 2 objects that host light sources, then you can actually just switch there at the top of the left-hand side to manage the light sources and to enable or disable the light sources themselves. So this is how you can easily handle any sort of light source by just simply, lamp, by just simply selecting them and checking their light source property and just manage it. Those are the informational parts, but those are, here are parameters that you can actually change, turn it on or off, or change the dimming level.
How do I see if they are on or off? Because now they are supposedly on, but I can see them
well, for this, you have at least 2 options, but the best option is to render it. Now, ARCHLine has this built-in render, and you can find it when you are in a perspective view. You can find it here. This Golden Globe hosts 4 different options. Those are actually 2 main groups, like the standalone render and the integrated render. The integrated render is which I'm starting with now, and I'm actually starting with a real-time drop, because whatever I do, this is actually what this dialog describes. I would like to keep following the changes. I just would like to see how it reflects to what I do. If I change the light intensity, I would like to see that. Before we go into that, just quickly summarize what we see here. You can see the resolution of the image. You can see the render quality. Now that's real-time drop. That's the real-time renderer. So that's fine. And you can also enable the artificial lights. That's like a main switch for all the lights. You can enable or disable sunlight. I will show you what that means. And of course, you can have a background, either panoramic or not. I just selected a single source of a photograph from pexels.com. So I just click on Start Rendering, and then ARCHLine actually prepares the model for rendering. This is what happens now at the bottom. And then it opens up a new window, a new kind of, it looks like a drawing actually, because I selected this integrated option, and this means it will be integrated into the project. It will behave as a drawing. And now whatever I see is a very quick render. It won't clear up to be a final. I will be able to do that soon, but now I intentionally chose draft render, so that's the whole purpose. It won't clear up, but it will give me a very, very fast result to see either the lights are on or off.
So can we return to the question what we had before about how to bring in external light sources, lamps, I mean, and that would actually explain what the difference is between a lamp and a light source. So can we quickly grab an example.
Now, okay, I think I will just remove this one, and I will try to find another item. So as you can see now, it's disappeared there, and of course it's light source as well.
Pretty fast this way.
So yeah, and it's a very good feedback for during design. If you have a powerful enough computer, I mean, shouldn't be a very powerful one, but if your computer is not too old, it will be able to follow those changes. So now here, I will be either placing an object like a lamp here. I just drag and drop like on another desk or anything from the libraries, or I can go to the interior and I find the warehouse or the BIM libraries and I try to download something. Now I will go with the 3D warehouse because that's a very popular option. And here I will download something like a swing table lamp. I think this is what we found to be quite useful. But you can, at home, when you try this, you can try to do the same thing with other type of lamps. This is just, we found that this will match the style of this interior design. Yes. But other than that, it's just the same thing, just as downloading anything else from the 3D warehouse. There is only kind of one difference here, is that its name features the word lamp. And when it happens, ARCHLine actually is trying to listen to what you download and what was the original name of that. Because these items, they don't actually have lights in them. They are just single objects. So anyone downloading these items to anywhere else, they will just have a lamp-shaped object without light. But ARCHLine is trying to figure it out whether this is a lamp. So when you click on download, and by the way, before I do that, see, those options are also important when you download something from the warehouse.
Yes.
It shouldn't have a very high poly count. It shouldn't have a very big size. Now this is absolutely fine, not so many materials, so I just download it.
What's the recommended amount of value? If there's some kind of rule or...
Well, actually, I don't remember the exact numbers, but actually ARCHLine will tell you if you download something with too many materials, if you download something with too many surfaces, ARCHLine will send you a message that this might be a difficult thing to handle, so you should consider switching to something else. If you download something, a very detailed object, either a lamp or anything else, you will easily end up with a model that is very difficult to handle, like trees or something like that. We actually have a solution for that, so yes, we will talk about that at the end. Okay,
so now we brought in this lamp. So supposedly the software knows that there's a light source in it, right?
Yeah, well, ARCHLine automatically prepares the top view as a symbol, so I'm able to place it on top of the desk, but this actually depends on what was the setting for object placement. Now, my previous setting was to the ground, it was 0, so that's why this object actually landed on the ground. It's there, so I just use the same value. Let me just check if I find this object, I can see the height. This is 550. I can also double check it here. And when I click here, I can also see the main boundaries, and there is one value here. This is the same. This is the base elevation. So I can either click here or here and change it to 550. And then now it jumps to the top of the desk. I mean that little item, this one here. But what I do is actually, let me just zoom in here. I just did something strange with this image, so let me just close this. So I just render it again with the real-time draft, yeah, and let's just go with that, and
what we want to know now is that whether you need to manually add the light source, or it's there but you need to adjust it, or what comes next?
So while this happening, while it's rendering the model, let me just go back to this view and see whether it has a light source or not. When I select it, I have at least two ways to understand that. It appears, this little tiny marker appears, so it actually has. And also I can find the same light source option, and I can turn it on or off, or make it dimmer, or make it even, I don't know, if I use 300%, then it goes 3 times the value of this original light source. But somehow it's not affecting my interior, but there is this strange light strip, and this happens because, well, ARCHLine wanted to figure out whether this is a lamp or not, but it cannot actually easily determine what's the proper location of that light source, because there's no such information in these models. So what it does, it actually just selects the item, And let me just reveal that. I go to the lighting and edit light source setting, and it actually attaches to the bottom center point.
That's no good.
Which in case of a pendant lamp would be perfect, but in case of a standing lamp, it's not that perfect. So I have the option to move it somewhere else. Somewhere inside this this shape, which hosts actually the bulb itself. But take care, because if you do this on the side view, this is not enough. You should actually check from the top view or another view to be able to determine whether this is fine or not. So I just go to the top view and see it's a bit off. So I just place it over here. And another thing, when you download an object, you don't really know how it was modeled until you check it, and this is an easy way to kind of make a wrong lamp by just simply accidentally landing this light source inside this, I don't know, metal part, and in that case you will end up something similar like we just see on the screen. So when you do that, you check it on the render, so you just say okay. And then if that is brightening up the scene, then you're fine. If it's still not working, then you should have trouble with the placement or with the material. We will talk about the materials soon.
This is not the best example, but how do we add additional light sources to a lamp?
Well, this can be done by simply selecting the lamp itself, going to the local menu, the context menu, and selecting the lighting again, and go to the add edit light source. And you have this add light source option if you have a chandelier, for example. By the way, those names like chandelier, light, lamp, those will all trigger this mechanism to say that, well, this should be a lamp, so I will attach a light source to the bottom of it. So if you click on add, you will actually go to the libraries of the software. The global library is the factory default, and here we can find the same compact fluorescent and incandescent, halogen, and all sorts of other light sources that you can just simply select and attach, and then you can just make them dimmer. You can turn them on or off, or just simply place them just as I did. Or also there is the option to switch from this one by clicking on change to another type if you just would like to have one single light source, but a different one. In that case, you go there.
So we have placed this lamp. What's next? We see a LED element up there, LED stripe.
Yeah, well, this LED strip here, this is actually this one here on the drawing. So let me just erase that for a while. So I will be able to show you how you can create one. Let me just zoom out a little bit so we can see this from the far end of this room, like from here. See, it's over there. So I will just create this LED strip. LED strip in this specific case will be a very simple line in the 3D space, but this can actually be like a curvy or something like following an edge of something. You can use it in 2D and in 3D. Now I'm actually just clicking on the edges of this ceiling, and then when I hit enter, I can set up the light intensity, the cross section. The cross section, I think it will be a little bit smaller. I'm actually talking about this cross section, this here, which is governed by the profiles that you can create in ARCHLine. Also, you can set up a material. This material won't always appear. It will only appear when you turn off the LED light source.
That's a light color then?
Yeah, no, it's not the light color. This is actually the color of the body of the lamp itself, like the LED strip itself. You can also set up the relative elevation. Now this should be around, if I remember correctly on this design, it was this value, but you can just figure it out when you see it appears in the design. Also, I think I will change its light color. Originally it was something white. Now I will just go with a warmer color. Maybe this will be too much, but well, let's just go with this and we will see whether we like it or not, and say okay. And then when I click OK, it appears on this drawing and it appears over there. So if I'm fine with that, I keep it. Or if not, for any reason, because I just would like to change its intensity or something like that, I can do that. I can turn it on or off here, and the renderer will reflect those changes.
What about spotlights? That's something that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, well, this design features a few spotlights on the ceiling. Let me just show you. They are over there. They are actually, there are two ways to do spotlights, to place spotlights. One is like this on this project, when you just simply place them and hang them or attach them to the surface where you would like to make them appear. Let me just find another view where we can see them. Like actually they are there. Or actually, there is another way when you go to the settings of the suspended ceiling and you have this option to, set up the strips. We actually have another tutorial about that, so we won't cover that. But wherever we talk about lamps, either ceilings, pendant, or a desk lamp, or another sort of lamp, those are all governed by the same rules. There is an object which has 1 or 2 light sources, and then you can just handle them.
Now we talked about lights, but we know that the other huge topic when it comes to rendering and visuals is material settings.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about that too. So how does that work in ARCHLine? What to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing, and
yeah,
it's about...
we just return it for a second.
Yeah, and that's about the light sources. We covered what sort of light sources you can find in the software. And I actually mentioned that there is this design center with the home, and there's this light source catalog. Now this light source catalog is actually something that you can manually extend with existing manufacturers' light sources, like GE Lighting, Samsung, or any other makers, bulbs, actual bulbs, and those are called IES lights. Now this lamp actually features one of those. Let me just go there and use the same exact thing and just go here and see. You can there's this GE Lighting with a very specific name, and its category, its type is actually an IES light. IES is a file format, and you can go online to the GE's homepage, to any sort of maker's homepage. We actually have a built-in sample library of those, and this is how they look like. Now the advantage of using that these are actually the real world lights that you can actually go into the shop and you can purchase them and turn them into the fixture. So these are very rich. As you can see, they have a very nice figure on the walls. So this will, if you use those, this will enrich the quality of the visual. It will give you a very realistic light in the environment. So that's what I wanted to say.
So these are manufacturer items now.
Yes, that's right. And the way you can import them is actually here. You go to the light sources, you go to the IES, for example, and then you import the IES file. You just downloaded something and you just browse it and import it.
Great. Now let's talk about materials and finishes. So what do we keep an eye on here?
Yeah, about the materials, I think we just discussed this item here, so I will also talk about that. But let's just keep it in a big picture first. Now we have an interior, and usually, at least me personally, I end up with creating visuals somewhere in between the design phases, and then from time to time I check whether my materials are fine or not. And there is a very, very simple tool in ARCHLine to do that, and that's called the render styles. Now, when you have this model in front of you, let me just enlarge this. When you have this model, then you can actually set up what is the type of that material, what is the render style of that material in front of you, either it's a textile or something, by just simply selecting that in the render styles here. Now, as you can see, there are very typical light sources, I mean styles, render styles like the ceiling, which you can just simply click and drag and release, and then you can just click on the surface, and then from that point on, it changes how it acts in the render. Now it didn't because it was already set, but this is how you can easily set up walls. For example, you can say that, for example, whenever I see this material, that should be a wall type material. So I just click and drag, and I click on that. So now wherever this material was applied, as you can see, it became a bit darker in this tone, and it still behaves well in the 3D environment. There are also floor setting like parquet here, which I will use later when we see it much better. And there's textile, fabric, and all sort of other things. Like, for example, here I just downloaded this object, and I expect this to have a very specific material like a metal.
Yes, a metallic glossy. Or
yeah, this definitely should be some sort of metal. And well, when you download something like this, it's not happening automatically, because when you download this object, now this comes from, for example, 3D Warehouse, it has a limited ability to determine what sort of material shaders you could have. So you should make sure that you do set up the material type. Like this is a metal, so you just click and drag, and then just click on it, and it will change how it looks like. Now it's much more glossy, much more metal-like, And if I just go to the, for example, let me just try how it looks like with the same color but with a little bit more chrome tone, then I just click there and see now it's much more shiny and it's a bit different. So at least this is what you should do with the downloaded object, whether it's a regular object or a light. I'm in a lamp.
How can I keep track of the styles that I have already applied?
Well, it's an easy thing. Let me just zoom out and find this original view where we left off, and it was this one. So how to determine, just as you told, whether I worked with these or not. I just click on the color code and I can see whether those things are already set up or not. And this color tone tells me that, for example, this item here, as you remember, I told that this should be a wall. So I can see the same exact color tone here. And this helps me figuring out whether I should work a little bit more on those or not. And if yes, then I can just click and drag and just change it. When I click here on restore, it restores the original view and then it looks like this.
Perfect. But let's now take one step back, because now we are applying render styles, but we don't know how materials would end up in the software. So how do you import them?
Well, if you would like to create a new material, first things first, let's just cover that part as well. ARCHLine has a built-in catalog of materials. You can use those. You can go to the materials, you can find colors, you can find fabrics, metals and things like that. So wherever you go, you will be able to click and drag and use those materials, and they will appear. Like, let me just go with this bronze here, for example, and just click on replace this material with another. So it will replace all the same materials wherever they appear. So yeah, I will see the color tone changing, and now it looks different in the 3D. So this is how easily you can do that. When you would like to bring in a new material, this happens also in the Design Center. You click here and you go to the Create New Material, and this is where you can set up a material. Now, a material can be created based on a color or based on a texture. If you would like to create a material based on a texture, let me just open up my browser and let me just Google for texture. If I do that, let me just open up Google. And then here you have a very good option to find something like, I actually did a few research here, so I just would like to find something like wallpaper texture.
Seamless, maybe?
And seamless, yeah, that's a good thing to search for, because you don't want to end up with patches appearing on the surface. So that's one way to go. And then you go to the search for the language. This in English, this means images. So I'm going to the image search, and then I find something that I like. For example, I think this one. I like that. So I right click there and I click on copy image. I can either save this image for further editing, but now it's just enough to click on copy image and then going back to ARCHLine, which is this one, and then I just click on paste. And then it appears on the surface. I can just fine tune it. I can actually set up that this should be, for example, a wall surface with a little bit less of a brightness. And I can change all the other settings. I will talk about this a little bit later. I just click OK, and then I can just apply this material. I just click and drag on the surface, and I say, well, let's just change this material only on this surface. I don't want to change all instances of this, but only on this one. So I just click here, and then it appears. And then when it appears in the 3D, sooner or later it will also appear in the rendering as well. So I can easily see whether I should change any of those brightness, reflection, or other settings.
One thing that you always talk about when we set up rendering and materials is that we should always clean up the project and start with the larger surfaces.
Yeah.
Now, how do we clean up the project? That's my first question.
Well, now this is the 3D model here. I just switched up the rendering with the 3D model, so we can see it bigger. So to clear up the project, now I'm willing to focus on the large surfaces first, just as you told. In that case, I use the layer filtering, and this is here. I already made the layers to represent furniture, accessory, and lamps on different layers. So when I click on those and I click OK, the software will actually remove those in layer walk. I used this layer walk tool. It removes the items from the 2D, and when it was removed from the 2D, I can click on the 3D rebuild tool, which will refresh the 3D model and of course the rendering as well, by updating the view based on what happens in the 2D right now. I didn't put this on the proper layer now, but as you can see, if I would do, then it appears also together with the lamps. Now, what I see here is the floor, and I just talked about the floor, that I just would like to focus on that one a little bit more detail. So I just lower the eye level to see how glossy it is. And now it's quite glossy, so I just would like to fine tune it. And first things first, I would like to check what are the settings of this material. Just to go back to the previous one, I usually go with the render styles first, and I make sure that it appears in a way I want. So I just use the pocket and I click and place it. So now it changes how it reflects. And I think it's much better. It's much more realistic. I could, for example, go with matte. Let's just go with that material setting, and it appears. Yeah, it's over there. So let's just make it matte. Let's just do that. See how I like it. Well, this is not really what I wanted. I still see the same detailed texture, but the material is just not that right. So let me just go with the pocket. And then even with a pocket, there is a wide range of pocket types. How much glossy, how much I mean reflective this surface is. So if I would like to check what are the settings of this material, I just right click on the surface and I just click on Find Material. So this will actually reveal the settings of this American walnut pocket here. And when I scroll down, I can find, actually this is a pocket just as I said it before. I can change it here as well, but I don't want to do that. I can change its brightness, I can change its reflection. Let me just make it a little bit more reflective. So when I do that, we can see sooner or later when this render updates the changes. I need to wait a little bit. See now it's updated here, and soon it will update the render as well, since it's much more glossy now. So you can actually fine-tune those settings. I usually recommend my students to find a reference image, I mean a real-world photograph, which you can match on your screen whether you achieved your goal or not, and it's a very, very good goal and a very, very good starting point.
What other tricks do you have to make it more realistic?
Well, I don't want to go deeper into these settings because most of them are self-explanatory, and most of them are actually setting up a very good base level. You just need to fine-tune them. There is one specific thing I just wanted to highlight, and that's the Fresnel effect, which is I don't know if I don't learn about it, I just simply don't know what that means. But it's a very, very simple thing, and it's a very, very useful thing. ARCHLine actually automatically sets material settings for Fresnel or not when it's necessary, but it's good to know what that does. So let's just go and reveal that on the wall surface, for example. Now this wall surface, just as we discussed before, I just lost my orientation. So let's just go back to this view. Yeah, this is cool.
Turn a little bit to the right, and then you can see.
I just would like to see this wall from a very, very low angle, because this reveals what Fresnel does. Now I will just find this material. This is actually the wallpaper gold silk, and this was set to be a wall surface, but I can change it to anything else, like for example a general material type. The general material type is actually the jolly joker of all the materials, because if you cannot find a very, very specific material, this is the material type that does everything except lighting and gloss surfaces. But you can set it up here, and then you can go and find this same setting, and now it's actually on. So let me just increase its reflection, so you will understand what that means. If I increase the reflection to somewhere around 40, very, very high reflective, yes, I can see it's kind of glossy here. But when I change the view angle, this glossiness, this reflection seems to disappear.
Yes.
And actually this is what you can see all around you in the real world. When you see this very surface right below our hands, this is from a very low angle is more reflective than from this angle. So this is what Fresnel does, and this is why it's a cool thing that actually ARCHLine handles those real world material types. I mean physically based material types. This is automatic, but you can also manually control it if you want, if you have, for example, the general material types. So this is, I think, all about materials for the first hand.
Let's talk about the rendering process itself. So far we were creating draft renders, but now let's look at what we do if we want to create a final result.
Well, for that, let me just first bring back all those details that I just turned off. So I just go back here and go to the layer walk, and I just turn back the lamps, the furniture, the accessories, and let's say OK. And this is actually, by the way, a very good recommendation how you should work with your project. When you have your design, and now we are focusing on the interior, you should have layer set for one room. Like this room has lighting, accessories, and furniture, and those should be grouped to different layers. So you will be you will be able to set up easily very simple, a little bit more detailed, and a very, very detailed representation of the same room by just using the layers. So now I just turn them on and I click on the 3D hammer. So it actually rebuilds the 3D model and brings back all those details that I just turned off earlier. And then we can see how the rendering process actually works. But now, at this specific time, I will just skip the real-time built-in renderer, and I will focus on how you produce final results for your clients.
Let's see.
So now let me just click on this one, close it, and set up a different perspective like this one, the original one. And I just click on render, and I click on standalone rendering. I mean a regular rendering, not real time this time. So I will just end up with the same setting. This time the basic setting is exterior. I will just go with interior now. And I don't change anything else. I just click on start rendering. And while it's doing that, I just organize the desktop. Yeah, it's appearing. Let me just organize it. So actually, there is a difference here. Now, ARCHLine does not host the render inside as a drawing, because I have chosen the standalone render, and now it's acting like a separate application. So now in this dialog, what we can see, the rendering is a little bit slower because we have chosen the interior rendering style, and it's actually just simply doing a lot more job to be able to set and create high detailed, fine, polished render without glitches, without all those noise that I could see earlier. And this is why it takes way longer than before. But as you can see, it's comparable. I mean, in light settings and in everything else, it's comparable to the original one. So it's a very good progression to work first with the real-time render and then with the final renders. And during it's doing its thing, I can actually set up the exposure. You should always start with the exposure first when you see the effects. And then you can set up the brightness, for example, the contrast as well. I always recommend to play smooth with these things. As you can see, if you use too much brightness, it's actually just washing out the colors of this whole thing. If I just would like to go back to the original settings, I don't have to remember whether it was 0 or not. I just click on this one, and it goes back to the original setting, and then I just move that. This actually still behaves as a drawing. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can just pan it just as with the drawing. But now we are working in a separate window with a separate application. And the other reason why it's a good thing that actually the renderer is eating up a lot of resources of your computer. It's actually using as much as possible. So if you have limited resources, now when you started rendering, you can actually save and close your project behind saving those resources like memory and the CPU power. You can just bring those all to the renderer. So talking about these, there is brightness, contrast, saturation. You can oversaturate it or desaturate the content. This really behaves just as expected. The shadows. This is actually the darker, the already dark places of this image. You can further highlight them, make them stronger. In a way, you can see it on the screen. There's also the same for the midtones, the highlights, and the white balance. You can make it a bit cooler. I mean, I think this is a bit too cool. You can make it a little bit warmer to highlight that this is, for example, in the summertime or the wintertime, or just go back to the defaults. And whenever the renderer finished rendering, you can just click on the save option. You can at any time stop rendering. This means the rendering is terminated. You can restart it, but that starts the whole cycle from its beginning. And then you can also go to the details, and this might be familiar because actually this
is how we started.
This has all the same settings. I can go with with an exterior setting as well. And let me mention that for most of the interior design projects, exterior render quality is just as fine as the interior render quality. I will show you an example. I have a few images collected. And it's because exterior itself, I mean the exterior render style itself was tailored for very well lit environment. So if your interior is very well lit, just as this one is, then you will end up with the same result, either choosing the external or the interior render style, but with a different render time. As you can see, exterior finishes much quicker than the interior render style, and then the result will, at this specific project and with these specific lights, it will be the same.
Let's talk about time factors a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because you talked about how to create something and how long it would take, but what are the things that have a direct interaction with the time you spend on rendering?
A direct interaction is just as we discussed it now, which defines the quality factors and the rendering time, is the quality itself. When you select exterior, it finishes much quicker than when you select interior and when you select high detail. This is the slowest, but the most high detail. But it wouldn't be wise to always go with the high detail. I will show you an example to that, because just as I mentioned, exterior here will just as do the same result as the interior. Also, lights affect rendering time. If you have more and more light sources, rendering will take longer. Let me just terminate this rendering, and as you can see, we reached around 30% in 2 minutes. So if I disable all the artificial lights and then I just don't change anything else, just this one. See, now the rendering restarts. Now it generates a few things, and then now it's just starting rendering. And of course the visual is obviously different, but it also goes faster because there are no artificial lights that it should count with. So when you have less light sources, the renderer will finish quicker. And the reason why it's important, that imagine the building where we are now. We are in a larger office building, in one office, in one room of that office. Now this office has several rooms, so if I filtered my model before rendering this room to only these light sources, these lamps, these objects, I can narrow down, I can just simply shorten the rendering time, because the software wouldn't have to calculate all the rest of the rooms, because it just works with this part of the room. And this actually leads to the third factor of rendering time, and that's the number of surfaces. So the more surfaces, the more objects you have in your model, rendering will also take longer. So now in this case, just as we did it already with this model, we filtered out everything else, because now we are focusing on this single room. So we turned off all the layers that host the other parts of the rooms and sanitary ware and everything else. So now we only represent items in the 3D with the 3D hammer that affects our current visuals at this very moment. I
understand that you have a few examples to show the rendering settings and how the quality would be influenced by that.
Yeah, so let me just stop this. I actually already saved a few of those images. Yeah, I just click on close, and those images are here, and actually it's in the, let me just go back to the, it's actually here, webinar, and there's the visual design and renders. So we can see that there's a few examples for one sort of final result with one sort of background, one sort of light setting, and from a different view. We actually used a lighting material here. Actually, ARCHLine hosts an emissive surface. You can use that. And the example that I wanted to talk about is the different quality settings. Now, this environment was intentionally designed to be less lit. And it has a lot of, we call them expensive light sources, because those are not just simple spots, those are surfaces. Surfaces are more difficult to render. So that means if you don't have enough quality, this is set up as exterior, you will end up with a noisy render, as you can see. There is quite a lot of noise on the surface. Yes. It's simply because the software didn't have enough time to consider all of those details. Now, if you just go on and increase the quality setting to interior, the noise will reduce. Now, I think some of us will already say that this is okay already, or some of us would say that let's just go with the high detail, and the high detail will clear it up fully. But in a sacrifice of a longer rendering time. So if I would have to say anything about time here, the first would take like around 5 minutes on this specific computer with this specific setting. The second would take 15, and the third would take more than an hour. So that's the progression between the different qualities here.
You did mention that there are some differences between the internal and external renders. So maybe you have another project with which to illustrate that.
Yeah, let's just go with that. I think I have prepared this building which we discussed during this whole webinar series, and that was the building of one of our designers, Gabor Scholz, and we are very grateful for him to deliver this project for us. So this project is a typical, now in this specific case, this is just conceptual, but it's a typical dwelling, I might say. And when I do the rendering for this one, it's actually the same, the process is the same. I just select whether I would like to use it integrated or standalone. I set up the resolution, I set up the setting, everything is the same except one thing, and that's the exposure, because it is exposed to the sunlight, which is a very, very strong daytime. So instead of increasing exposure, which I most likely would do in the interior, I usually keep it or even dial it down for the external renders.
This time it's the other way around.
And
right?
another important thing for external renders is the surrounding. Now, most of the time you will be fine with an external image, I mean a photograph, but I think this is the place where we should talk about that ARCHLine actually hosts panoramic backgrounds as well, which really and literally surrounds the 3D space here. So whenever you change and turn the camera direction, it will show a different part of the world.
Perfect. Now, if you could just load up the previous project up,
Yeah.
because there are two other things we should talk about. One is the Panorama 360 walkthrough.
Yeah.
So how does that work and what the end result is?
Well, the Panorama 360 is based on two very simple principles, and it's that you would like to be in a model which is as much as possible interactive, and you should be able to travel through space, but not freely, because this should be available for everyone using low power and low performance computers. Yes. So what we do, we go to the view, Panorama 360, and we set up a camera. That will be our camera in the bedroom, so I will name it bedroom. Let me just name it BR, like bedroom. I can set up the height, I can place it here, and then I can also turn it around to tell whether I would look at the window first or on this area. And then I set up all the rest of the cameras where I would like to jump into, like for example the corridor and all other places. So corridor will be this one, and like that. And I can also check what this camera sees at first. So I just right click here and I click on set up perspective view. So it tells me, yeah, well, that's the wall surface, that's not too pretty. So let me just turn this over and use the same command again, set up perspective view. So now I can see the door.
Yes.
I can of course also open the door, so I can click here and I just selected, and here you can see the opening angle. Let me just set it up to 85. So now it's open. And then now there is one another thing that I should do, and I should connect those cameras. So when I do the Panoramic 360, I can tell the software that I'm actually traveling from this camera to this through this door. So that's the link hotspot. For that, I select I set up the height, and I set up the first camera, the second camera, and its location in the 3D space, and I can just keep going. Now I already have these two, so I can actually generate the visual. And this visual can be generated either in draft mode. Draft mode means this visual quality.
Yes.
Like it's kind of like a cartoon, like a drawing, like with textures and shades and everything else. Or in rendered quality, which we saw just before. I will do the draft mode now because it is a very, very simple and very, very fast result. I will just overwrite, which I already have here. This should be, well, let me just save it into all three. I just don't want to overwrite the original one. So I just save it. And as you can see, it generates this panoramic 360 from 2 rooms in an instant. It takes a very, very short time.
And it loads up in a browser, so you can send this file. It's an HTML file. You can send it to your clients, and then they can walk around and take a look around. And how do we get from one place to the other?
Yeah, well, actually, you can just use your mouse or your clients. This is one single file that you can send to your clients, and they can even play with this one on their mobile. So you can just click and drag, look around, up and down, or click there. As you can see, now it tells me that I'm going through this place to the corridor, and I can just look around. See, I cannot travel. I cannot just freely move in this 3D space because this is a series of panoramic 360s, but it allows me to kind of freely explore the model that my designer created with ARCHLine.XP.
There's one extra step. Obviously, you can render this.
Yeah.
It takes more time.
It takes way longer. If I would do this here with this model, it would take perhaps more than an hour, 1.5 hours perhaps.
Yes. Now the great thing is that you can take this HTML file and you can load it up to a mobile phone, and you can take one of these VR goggles which are able to host a mobile phone in them. So you can load the file onto the mobile phone, put it into this this pair of goggles, put it on, and then if you turn your head, you will navigate around the model. We have a video to demonstrate. Otherwise, it would be a bit more difficult to demonstrate that. But we do have a video of how this should work in live. So. You put on the goggles. As you turn your head, the G sensor in your phone understands that you have to navigate around the place, and then it would turn the view accordingly. So this way you can quickly and efficiently explore the things which are working on in ARCHLine at the moment. This is something that you can send to your clients, and
that's right.
And they can easily discover what you have just created.
That's right. What you saw on the video, that was the rendered quality. So now you can compare what's the difference, and now you can compare what's the difference in render time as well.
Yes. One thing left here in this project, and that is animation. That's something that we have to talk about. How do we set up the animation, and how does that work?
Well, animation in ARCHLine is walkthrough animation. Walkthrough animation means that you can set up a path where the camera goes through. Let me just make a very simple one. When we approach this room from the corridor and then just turn around like this one, and I hit enter, and then from each and every key points, these are the key points, I can determine where I would like to look at, like this one. And then when I hit enter, the software asks me to set up the eye level and the target level. I just go with okay. I think this will be fine, and then I can play that animation. And see, I should change the background now to panoramic because that would work much better. But other than that, it's just a very simple thing. You can set up the length of this animation. You can do that here by setting up a different length for this animation, and you can just simply change the eye height and things like that. So, for example, if I would like to end up with a higher eye level or lower eye level, now I am at this key point. I can just lower the camera just as I would do with other sort of settings, and then. See, now it's just lowering its angle. So now at the end, I can save it as an AVI file, like a video file on my computer, and this is how easily you can do that. I really recommend everyone to create short shots, not long and extensive ones, and connect those short shots with fade outs and all sort of text and things like that in a video editor.
So instead of having one continuous shot, you should have multiple small segments.
Smaller ones,
And this is where we actually tie into the next level, because the things that we have set up so far, the lights, the geolocation, the sun position, the materials, the animation, these can be all wrapped up and sent to our new application, ARCHLine.XP Live. Now, in a couple of words, in case you have missed the last show that we did, ARCHLine.XP Live is our new product, which is targeted for architectural and interior design visualization. What it does is that it creates a rendered view of your property without having to render it, right?
Yeah, and there's a difference here. As you can see, its quality is somewhere in between the regular model view and the render. It has a very nice feature of light sources, reflections, and everything, and all those happen in real time. So you can work in this model. You can select the surface. You can change its material settings. You can make it brighter or darker tone. So this is really what we can do in real time. So this is kind of we are in the 360 panorama, but we are actually working in the visual. We can work with the visual surfaces. You can also select the light source, change the light source properties, change its intensity, turn it on or off, and of course you can enrich this content by using other sort of materials, or going there and find, for example, a human character and place it somewhere here, and then just simply, I don't know, like for example, rotate it or something like that, and then just do a rendered image. I mean a photograph which is actually literally taken from this angle when you click on any of those images. Like for example, I have this image here.
Yes.
We also have candle lights, like real effects and lights appearing here. Also plants and surrounding, as you can see on the outside. Another sort of view like this one. I think I will just simply fine tune it and then update it. This is the update button. Yeah, I would like to update that. And actually, whenever I do that, it was just 1 second, and now I have the updated image on my computer, and I can send this image to my clients. That's it actually over there. I can already send this to my clients. Perhaps I should change the light conditions, but what you see here, is the image file which was actually created in 1 single second. And whenever I make the changes, so now for example I change the light intensity, this was too much, like this one, I think I'm fine with that, and let's just make it a bit warmer. Okay, I think I like this. Okay, and then let's just click on update. Yeah, it's updated, so now I can send this over to my clients because it was updated.
So as you can see, the visual is now a bit different, but it's fast.
Yeah.
So if you want, if you are in a position where you have to create dozens of images one after the other, then Live would be a very good match for that need, because it's able to actively react to what you are doing and create images with a blink of an eye.
Yeah, that's right. You can also change the light settings, I mean the daytime settings as well, by simply just moving and dragging this slider around. This also happens in an instant.
And that also comes from the model, from the geolocation we have specified. It's the same sun position.
All the sun location, the light sources, the material settings themselves, the render styles are all coming from ARCHLine, and this is a very good extension to ARCHLine. If you have a good graphics card and the regular computer, a computer that is good for ARCHLine and it's powerful enough to work on large and complex projects, will be absolutely fine for ARCHLine.XP Live. The difference here is that the classic renderer, the built-in renderer in ARCHLine.XP, the design system, it uses the CPU, the processor, and the RAM, the memory. And this renderer, the ARCHLine.XP Live real-time renderer, this uses the GPU, the graphics card, like game engines do.
That's right. That's basically what we wanted to cover during this session of the ARCHLine.XP visualization tools that we have. We talked about what the most important things to set up are: materials, lights, how to create lamps and light sources, how to use the sunlight, and what are the tricks and tips for better rendering, because it all comes down to the time that you spend on renderings, because that's what your clients are going to pay you for. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. Stay tuned for more shows on ARCHLine and ARCHLine.XP Live. Topics will be announced soon. For now, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to see you next Wednesday for the next webinar that we have. Yeah. If you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you would never miss a show like this one in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Goodbye.